Well, hello, VW Lifers. Jake and Gary here, and today we are going to bring you guys just something that's really simple. A lot of folks are getting ready to go road trips in their Volkswagens this summer. Some camping trips are planned. Stay tuned for that. But what we're going to do today is just show you guys some really basic things that we like to check. I was talking to somebody the other day that's a new bus owner. She was really frustrated because just not a lot of like ways to simple ways to check things. There's no, hey, go to this source and look and say, how do I make sure I have the right amount of oil in there? How do I take the timing? How do I change my generator belt? Things of that nature. Change the fuel filter. So today what we're going to do is we're going to do some really just basic little things to show you guys how we do it, before we go on a trip, the things we like to check, how we like to change things, make sure everything's good to go. And if you're out on the road, some general spares that you need to have with you. We've gone through the huge amount of spares, but just the things that you really want to make sure you have with you, because you don't want to be stranded on the side of the road because of a silly accelerator cable brake or something like that. Stick with us today. I think it's going to be kind of an informative little VW Live, so let's go. So let's start with the simple things first. A good tire pressure gauge. Here, this may sound crazy, but these things differentiate between gauge to gauge. So get you a gauge and be consistent with it. One that you feel confident with, because if you're off 5-10 pounds, it could possibly be the case. I like this little guy right here. This is a Tire Tech. It's got a telltale on it. So I kind of like that.
What's that mean?
That means you'll see here in a second. On our general grabbers, we run them, I believe it, 40 pounds? Is that what we run?
We run 38.
Jake runs 38. That's why I get better fuel mileage than he is.
Or 42.
There's the telltale right there. You can see where it sticks. So yeah, you're right, 39. So then you just pop that release there. So that's good. A lot of time on the sidewall, the manufacturer will have tire pressure, whatever it is. These are 50. Okay. A lot of people run. I don't run quite what all the way to the max pressure, but that's where you get the best stability on your tires and you'll get the better fuel mileage and you're gonna get a little bit of rougher ride, but you're in a Volkswagen. But man alive, go around and check your tire pressure. That's the first thing you should always check before you go on a road trip. And don't forget to check this too, or if it's a non-walkthrough, but check your spare too, because you don't want to go out on the road and have a flat spare, because then you don't have a spare. So you always want to check your spare. Make sure that your spare has air in it too. So make sure you always check your tires, get a good tire pressure gauge, keep inside your bus or something like that, so you'll have it with you whenever you're on the road and everything like that. Let's go ahead and pop the deck lid here on old Ziggy. See how things are looking in here today. Ziggy's running a 1776. We got a 205M distributor on there. And one of the things we did just for our sakes is we wrote on here what the timing specs are for Ziggy. It's a 205M. It's at 0 degrees TDC is our timing mark. So we'll get to timing here in just a second. We're going to check dwell first. A couple things you just want to look at as you're looking into your bus. First things first, always, or your bus or Volkswagen, is this is the key right here, because if you lose this belt, you lose the cooling of your engine. You have to make sure that your belt is good for your fan, because this is truly the definition of a fan belt. It spins the fan in the back that cools your engine. What the general consensus is you want a 1/2 inch of deflection between the two pulleys, so that way you don't want it too tight because it'll pull the bearings. You don't want it too loose, it'll slip. So here's your 1/2 inch of deflection right there. So if I can move this belt about a 1/2 inch, which I feel that I can, okay, if you want to like look at make a eye on a point and move it, so this belt's just about right on where it needs to be from a 1/2 inch standpoint. A couple of things you always want to have with you though when you go is belts. I like running these Continentals. They just seem like they fit better than Gates or anything else that you find out there. A couple of things you see. This is a 10 by 900. That's a 9.5 by 905. This is the overall length. That's the width of the belt. So this one's a little bit wider, 1/2 millimeter wider. But the difference on that width is it's a little bit shorter because of the way it sits down into the pulley. So it's going to sit a little higher in a pulley, so it can be a little shorter. Whatever you do, make sure you're carrying your generator belts with you, okay? That's the key.
All right.
Always have a spare.
Old man, if somebody say they don't have the exact fit how can they change it to make it fit better?
So that's one of the things that we're not going to get into. I'm not going to. I don't want to do this because
it's working well.
So perfect, yeah. But what you're going to need to do is you're going to need either a 19 or a 21, and you're going to pull this off right here, this main nut. You may have to stick a screwdriver into this slot here to keep the whole thing from spinning because it might be that tight. Once you do that, you'll pull off this nut and then this concave big washer here, and then you'll see there should be 8 shims. And we'll show you a picture of those shims here in just a second. But the shims themselves, you have to have 8 of them. Sometimes you put them on the inside of here. And if you put them on the inside, what it's going to do is it's going to spread that out. So it's going to make the belt it'll be a little bit further down into the groove, so it'll be shorter. But if your belt's too loose, you take shims out there and you put them out here and you start pulling that in. It's going to squeeze the pulley together because this is 2 pulley halves. At that point, you'll tighten it back up and see where you are with your deflection. So make sure though that you always have 8 shims. Make sure that you put your extras on the outside because you might need them again if your belt needs to adjust or something like that. That way you always have them there because the next belt you may have maybe a little bit short, a little bit long. So number one thing, always check your belt. Always have a spare one for you, okay? Next thing we're going to check is our fuel filter. A couple of things on fuel filters also very, very, very important. Change your fuel lines. We change our fuel lines about every year or 2, okay? Put brand new fuel lines on. You want to make sure you're using the right size. Don't stick 1/4 inch on a Volkswagen. It's too big. These are 5mm, okay? Notice where we put the fuel filter on here. A lot of people just have it hanging here. I mean, there's a little bit of safety involved in this. We put the fuel filter where it's tucked back over here. If it were to burst, hopefully we wouldn't get it inside with sparks. It's something we don't want to have happen. The fuel filters we use, I don't like using the cheap Chinese ones. I like using these Bosch right here. The advantage I like also on these fuel filters that are clear is you can see what your fuel looks like. So a lot of people will run a fuel filter underneath. I like running them up here because when they're clear, I can see through them. If I got to change on the side of the road, it's just a little bit easier, that standpoint. But a fuel filter, but even more importantly, is your fuel hose from your carburetor to your filter to the pump, and then your pump back to the metal line. When you go to your metal line, make sure your metal line has the grommet going through the tin there too, okay? You don't want that metal line vibrating there. It actually will cut over time. I put these little cut a piece of hose and put over that just so it won't rub up against anything like that. Feel pretty good. Generator belt as always, fuel hose, fuel line, and the grommet in the back. Here's something that might seem as silly as the day is long, and that is checking your oil, right? First and foremost, don't get into a habit of checking your oil when you're getting gas, because a lot of times a lot of the oil is going to be up inside your engine, and if it's going to need to be sitting for a little bit. So if you're getting gas and you're going inside and getting you some popcorn and a drink or something like that, and you're there for 10 or 15 minutes, and that's a different story. But if it's a quick gas and go, you're going to get a false reading on your dipstick over here. One thing you always want to make sure too, that your bus or your Beetle is on level ground, relatively level ground. And we're going to look at this, and boy howdy, that is a dead smack right where you want to be. Here are your 2 lines, so I'm gonna you can see where Ziggy is. He's looking right there on it, and these are the 2 lines on your dipstick that you want to be between, okay? A lot of times I've seen issues where people actually overfill because they think it's low, because they check their oil. Wow, it's just stopped running. So let your bus or Volkswagen, your Beetle sit a little bit and then come back and check your oil, okay? Check your level. But you want to be between these 2 little lines right there. So feeling pretty good about those. Those are some really simple little things that we check before we go on a road trip, as always. Of course, if you need to check, add a little oil. It's a little bit difficult to get to up here. Sometimes a little funnel might be easy. You have to be really careful when you pour. Thing is, if you have some spillage, and then it's gonna drain all the way through, and then you're gonna think you have an oil leak.
Once upon a time, I was in high school, and I carried a quart of oil back here in Boomer, and then hit a bump pretty rough, and that oil just knocked itself over, got in a weird spot, and had a slow leak. So after school, I came outside, and I thought I had a massive RGB leak, reduction box leak. And I was like, son of a gun. I was looking under there, I'm like, oh, it's just dry under the wheel hub. And sure enough, it's just a quart of oil spilling in the back. Remember,
we have no water in these, so oil is what keeps these things cool. So you want to really make sure that your oil level's, on the higher end there. If you're on the low end, add some oil in there, okay? That's how these things stay cool. All right, what we're going to do now is we're going to check our dwell. Now, if you're running an electronic timing ignition, like a Hall or a Petronix or one of those fancy electronic ignitions, your dwell is, you don't have to worry about dwell. It's automatic. Dwell is a percentage based on when the points are open. On most Volkswagens, you want your dwell to be between 48 degrees and 52 degrees. We have a little dwell meter here. pick these up at garage sales because people used to actually work on their cars in the olden days. So they don't work on cars anymore. So you can find these at garage sales all the time. I find these all the time. So you have 3 leads on your dwell meter. You have a ground lead, a power lead, and then a lead that goes up to your coil. So you're just going to go on the same side of the coil as where your wire comes from your condenser.
Hey, do this when your bus or Volkswagen is not running.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Otherwise, you'll get a little shock.
The advantage, of course, here in a bus is that we have power right here. Here's our ground right there, and then our power there. So, Jake, why don't you go ahead and fire Ziggy up, and let's see where we are here, buddy. So Ziggy, we'll let Ziggy warm up, but we're gonna go ahead, not even if it's warming up or not, your dwell's gonna be dead on. So we're checking the 4-cylinder, because that's what these are, 4-cylinder, and look at that, between 48 and 52, and we are right dead smack at 50. What a great spot. That is really, really, really good there. We'll let Ziggy warm up a little bit, but our dwell is set. Remember this, you have to set the dwell first, then you adjust your timing, okay? Dwell first, then your timing. If you're running electronic ignition, then you just time it because your dwell is automatically set. A couple of things here that I have, just some cheater notes. 48 to 52 is my dwell. If you're running a Type 4, it's 44 to 50. 48 horses, 40 horses the same, and just a little, the wider the gap, the lower the dwell, okay? So a lot of times with points is your Volkswagen going to start running really bad, and what happens is the points are closing up, and so you're losing your dwell. So our dwell is set. We'll feel pretty good about that. We'll let it keep running and warming up here a little bit. Once your dwell is set, and good thing Ziggy's all looking good there. We're gonna look at our timing. Timing lights are just like dwell meters. When people used to work on their cars, everybody had a timing light. They don't have them hardly anymore. Timing light's gonna come with 3 leads, same as before. A negative and a ground negative right here, and a positive right there. Then we have our sensor. This goes on this first spark plug. I like doing that, everything at once, so it's all consistent. And you want to get it as close down to the spark plug as possible back here on number 1. And it just kind of clamps around the spark plug wire there, okay? So now this is a vacuum distributor, okay? So what that means, the vacuum pulling to help pull a even in idle, it's advancing a little bit from where it was when we didn't have the advance hooked up. But watch it come all the way over to about 28 degrees when you give it some acceleration. Things first, you check your dwell. So you see where your dwell's at on your dwell meter. Once your dwell is set, then you can adjust your timing. So that means you may have to adjust the points. We didn't have to adjust our points on this one, okay? Thank goodness. Next up was the timing. You have to remove on this, a vacuum advanced distributor, you have to take your vacuum off, cap it so you're not losing air there on your carburetor, and then you can see where you are as far as where your ignition timing is. And we saw we were right at, this is a 0 degrees at top dead center, which we were right on it. And then as we put the vacuum back on and then went up to about 28 to 3,000 RPMs, you saw it was at full max, about 28 degrees. So this vacuum canister's working good. Ziggy seems to be really nice and tuned really well. So that's a good thing. One other quick thing, just to check, you're running your stock Volkswagen air cleaner. It is called an oil bath air cleaner. Gently pop this guy out of here real quick. Has these snaps. Be careful because they'll get you, okay? And it comes down, and this is full of oil, so don't tip it up sideways or anything like that. That'd be kind of crazy, okay? So these are really efficient. And if you run one of those little chrome filters, I would say, hey, get back and try to get your stock Volkswagen oil bath on there, because man, when you go into dusty conditions or anything like that, these work great. But you got to always make sure that they're clean too. That's the other key on these. Okay, so I'm gonna.
This is where the air goes in, gets cleaned before it goes into the carburetor, into the.
Yes. All right. So we'll pop that open, and there's the oil down in there, and you can see
that's a great color.
Yeah, it's nice and clean still because you just changed this the other day. And there's a little red line. You can kind of see it right over there on the See the little red line? That's the fill line. You don't want to overfill because then you'll have oil everywhere. I'm not exactly 100,000% sure. I guess it somehow the oil and the particles drop down into the dirt, drops down into the oil. What a crazy way. I'm sure people understand it engineering wise on how they work. They are very, very efficient and keep your Volkswagen engine running clean. But don't forget, when you're doing some work on your Volkswagen, that you want to go in there and change your oil in your oil bath. You don't want a bunch of gunk in there. Boy, I've seen some of these where it's just, there's no oil, it's just gunk down in there. So let's do a quick review. AJ, what all we did to Ziggy, just because you're getting ready to go on a little camping trip this weekend. So we did the air pressures. Make sure your air pressures are all good. Check your spare. You want to make sure your spare is looking good too. Then we came back and we looked at some things that you checked earlier just to be sure is a transmission fluid. Jake's really good about checking his tranny fluid.
Why am I good at that?
Yeah, I know. You got one that leaks like a sieve, but old Boomer does.
But it's put about 50,000 miles on it.
Yeah. And a junkyard transmission, so it's working pretty good for now. But so Jake's good. He checks the transmission fluid. You just need a 17 millimeter Allen head. I get a long one on an extension on a 1/2 inch, and you can get on there and get to it pretty easy. And
that's something carrying your spares.
Yeah, definitely carrying your spares.
Add that to your spares.
Yeah, you want the tranny fluids 85/90 gear oil, so be careful with that too. GL4. And you can test it because there's the little hole in the side of the transmission, and you put your finger in, and if you put your finger down like that, you come back out, it should have gear oil on it. So that's how you check, make sure you get that. So air pressures, gear oil. Then we came back here to the motor. We checked, we got new fuel line on, fuel filter looks good. We checked that. I feel good about that. Got your grommet going through your 10. Our generator belt flexes good. We got a spare generator belt for your road trip. That's pretty good there. You feel good about that. Then we checked your dwell. You're right on that. Check your timing. Timing looks good along those lines too. For the most part, you're pretty good. What do you need for spares on it? I mean, just the dead to the wall. You got to have these spares. You got to have a belt. You got to have a generator belt or you're going to be dead in the water. And you don't want to run your Volkswagen without that, period. Okay, need a generator belt. You're gonna need an accelerator cable. Okay, so get you a spare accelerator cable. These little ends here can sometimes pull out, and you're gonna have to, if that doesn't work, then you're gonna have to get you some wire and some string or something. Shoelaces, whatever you can. Yeah, baling wire to get yourself home. And then the other thing is hopefully something that, but believe you me, ask me how I know, is a clutch cable. Okay, and get a clutch cable and make sure you get a spare nut that goes on your clutch cable, because ask me how I know about that. Remember what happened that time in Westy a long time ago? We lost a clutch cable. It broke back on the transmission, and the piece it broke took the nut with it and was laying out on the highway somewhere. We looked for a while, but we couldn't find it. But fortunately, we had a pair of vice grips, put our other one on there, but I didn't have a spare nut. So we went to a hardware store in that little town. I don't remember what the name of that little town was. We actually found a metric nut that was able to go on there so we can continue on down the road. So I think as far as a road trip plans, I think Jake and Ziggy are pretty ready to go. I think they're as good as ready. You got to remember, you're driving something that's 50, 60 years old. Things are going to happen as you go down the highway. You just want to be as much contingency and ready for them as you can, and do a little prep maintenance. Okay, so we did this for some folks out there, hopefully that keeping things on the simple side, just a little bitty things to do before you go on your road trip in your Volkswagen. And we got a big one coming up, so what Jake just did in Ziggy, I'm going to have to go through in Jerry here in the next week or so before we go on our big trip. And stay off the main roads and just enjoy the journey, because that's that best part of getting there, boys and girls. We sure appreciate you guys out there and your comments and subscribing and telling all your friends and your aunts and uncles about VW Life. We do this for you, the VW community, so please spread the word. We got some good merch down there. Got even some Texas Junk King shirts, VW Life shirts, all kinds of good stuff. And if we left anything out, please comment. There's some things that you might, hey, what about you guys thinking about this? Because that's what we're all. We're all learning from each other as we go through this process. That's what it's all about, helping each other and learning as we go. We want everybody to be safe out there. We want you to enjoy your Volkswagen. Go out and have a good time. Drive it, okay? A friend of mine up in Maryland, she went and drove hers the other day and sent me some pictures. It was awesome. It's out and about. So I know you guys up north, this is the time when y'all make hay, because it's not so freezing cold and ice all over the roads and all that kind of stuff. Down here, well, we're fortunate. We just got to deal with the heat, but if you got some safaris and a cold drink, you're good to go. So thanks for staying tuned to VW Life. There's always more for here, and we really, really, really appreciate you guys and all the y'all, your comments and everything that y'all bring to us. Till next time, we'll see you later.